Hey, hey, and welcome to Happy, Healthy, and Skeptical. We are your hosts, Christy Palermo and Jennifer Hobson. All right, today we are talking about relationships and fixing relationships in your life that you might need a little hand with, or just dealing with things. And this is a huge topic that I know so many people can benefit from. So Jen and I are super pumped to have a guest speaker on with us today. We have Carlee Myers, and she is the founder of the Stress Less Company. And she's going to be sharing some of what she does, because I feel like it's so valuable to talk about this and to address the things that build up and then block our energy and then limit us in the rest of our lives, really, when we have these relationships that are stuck. And we all have them. So it's something so important to talk about. So as we get going, Carlee, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and, share a little bit about the Stress Less Company and how it can benefit people.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so grateful and humbled. I see the happy dance that I'm here. And yeah, the Stress Less Company, I've been in business we could round up in a couple months, it'll be 7 years. And basically what we do is we help people manage their day-to-day stress in a way that creates satisfying results, like improved sleep, more fulfilling relationships. The list goes on. And I've spent the last 7 years or so with an extra specialty, two specialties actually. One is a specialty in helping people who've experienced some sort of devastating loss in their past. So this intersection of loss or trauma and stress, and also relationships and safe conversations. And so I got into this line of work because of an experience I had, many experiences that I've had along my journey and my life, but it's powerful. It's powerful work.
I love that. When you started 7 years ago, had the thing that sparked you, had it happened recently, or was it something that had kind of been there and it slowly manifested over time for you?
Oh yeah. That's an interesting question. It had been there. It had been there. So basically what happened was, so I created the Stress Less Company because of an experience that I had when I was about 12 years old. And I
Okay.
do want to give a little bit of a trigger warning for your listeners, that I'm going to share a story of trauma, which is that when I was about 12 years old, a man was actually murdered in my home and my mom was shot 3 times. Um, and yeah, so while my mom basically made a miraculous recovery, I ended up struggling for a long time. So I was struggling with the symptoms of PTSD, right? So stress, nightmares, jumpiness, the list goes on. And for a long time, I sort of kept my experience in. But when I finally got the courage to step out and ask for advice, ask for support, it was like clockwork that I got the same sort of 5 or so responses every time. Hey, have you tried therapy, yoga, meditation, changing your diet, hitting the gym? It's sort of these more traditional responses. And I actually had tried a lot of those things, and in many ways they were very helpful. But none of those things got me over this hump to get me to where I really wanted to be, to get me to that place, that beautiful state of mind. And luckily, I wasn't really willing to accept this sort of low grade misery as my new normal. And so I kept exploring. And I finally figured out, the variety of things that worked for me, that were unique to me, that would serve me. And simultaneously, I felt relief. And I was I was pretty furious. I was upset. So I threw a temper tantrum. That's what it was. We're gonna call it what it was. Um, little for a little while, and once that tantrum ran its course, I had sort of a come to Jesus moment, if you will, where I realized, you know, I was upset that no one was talking about this, and so I had this come to Jesus moment where I realized that, well, hold on, maybe I'm supposed to be the one that's talking about this, and the Stress Less Company was born. The Stress Less method was created to help people figure out what uniquely works for them, what are their own saboteurs, their blocks that are getting in the way of finding that inner freedom that they're looking for.
I think that, I mean, that can be super powerful. The thing that you said was the traditional responses, right? We don't know what we don't know. And
Mhm.
if those are the only tools we've been offered time and time again, but they're not really giving us the solutions to the feelings, the emotions, even the physical responses that we're having to relationships, experiences, conversations, and trauma, then what else is there? So can you explain to me, and for me really being recently introduced, I know Christy has more, experiencing knowing what you do. If you were explaining to me, what is your stress less theory?
Yeah. So, a lot of, so this is why it was important that I brought up sort of this niche of someone who's experienced some sort of devastating loss. So it could be divorce, right? It could be death, the obvious loss that we all think about when we think about loss. It could be a major career change or just a huge life change that completely changed the way in which we see the world. And so what happens when we experience something like that, even if it was 20 years ago, even if it was 30 years ago, even if it was just last year, what can happen is that our nervous system has a baseline before we experience something like that. And that baseline is like calm, right? Contentment, relaxation, even, or just presence, right? Being able to like have the sun come through the curtains in the window and like see that and like be with it. So the nervous system, that's the baseline. But after we experience loss, oftentimes our nervous system gets rewired so that the baseline is our resting state is no longer that, and it's anxiety. And so basically what happens is since our baseline is at anxiety instead of relaxation, let's say, our triggers take us to a whole new level. So if our baseline was relaxed and something happens, maybe we would just get a little anxious. But if anxious is our baseline and something happens and it triggers us, now we're in panic. Now we're in spiral, right?
I'm
And
just
so
smiling because I can respond to
yeah,
it, not because I'm laughing at trauma and anxiety. I'm
yeah.
just laughing, going, yes, yes, I can respond.
Yep, exactly. It's so relatable. It's so relatable for so many of us. And this is the kind of the conversation that I have with people, which is like, when I say this, they're like, oh no, like my nervous system baseline is anxiety. Oh no. Like, but they laugh because it's like, yeah, me too. Darn it, you know? Um, but yeah, so the whole theory is, the stress less method, it's 5 steps. Um, it walks folks through how to first and foremost begin rewiring their nervous system to get that baseline back to calm. Um, Second, the second step is identify your blocks. So what are the coping mechanisms that you learned during that time or throughout your life that served you at some point, but now are no longer serving you? So an example of this for me is going through this traumatic experience with my mom. I thought that the guy that shot my mom, I could trust him. And so when this incident happened, I realized, oh boy, turns out you don't know who you can trust. And so the lesson that my nervous system and my subconscious learned was you need to be really hyper vigilant. You have to look for every little thing, every little detail to see if you can trust somebody or not. Or you have to look for every little thing, every little detail to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Now that was something that really served me because it is the survival mechanism. It's trying to prevent something really traumatic and awful from happening again. But what it also does is it gets in the way of me being able to enjoy the little moments, to feel the, like, just to even have the sun come through the window and be present with that, because I'm thinking, I don't know, is the window going to break? Whatever
Yeah,
the example is, right? Um, and so we don't know what we don't know, as you were saying earlier. So identifying our blocks is really, really powerful because we can say, hey, this served me at one point, but it no longer serves me. And now what can I do about it? And that's the rest of the process. Step 3 is to create a plan to address those blocks. Step 4 is actually to begin, I say remove the blocks, but it's really more like manage them. These are things that are really deeply wired into our bodies and our experiences, because that, like, for instance, my experience was quite dramatic. So it's not going to be erased overnight, but it can be about making that voice a little quieter and making the other voice, the voice that's about presence and love and joy and contentment and all of whatever beautiful state of mind you want, to be louder. So anyway, step 3 is create a plan. Step 4 is remove those blocks one by one, aka manage them. And then step 5 is embrace grace. And this is really the part where we're experiencing that inner freedom more often than not. And we're acknowledging that we're not perfect, nor are we meant to be perfect. We all have blocks. They're gonna show up, but how can we manage them? How can we return? How can we continue working to soothe the nervous system so that we can have a more freedom-filled, content life? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. What a beautiful thing you've created, this kind of system for people out of such a huge tragedy in your life, and to be able to have that moment to know that you were meant to be the person to talk about this kind of thing. Because as you're going through just those 5 steps, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, like there's not a person who couldn't benefit from something like this, that it's so valuable to bring things like this to light. A lot of times we don't realize the things that are holding us back. And a lot of it being traumatic experiences or just major shifts in our life that we don't realize how much it's impacting our actions now to hold me back from not doing the things I really know I need to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And, I want to put a caveat on that, which is that usually when we're in something, when we're in those major life changes, we don't realize how major they are until we look back. And so that's why, because we're in survival mode. That's the whole point of survival mode. That's the whole point of fight, flight, or freeze. If we knew how major it was, we might not get out of bed. And so that's why I end up working with a lot of people years later to manage that day-to-day stress, because now we're at a place where we're technically in many ways safe, but yet our body doesn't know that. And so what do we do about it?
Yeah, I think that's important too, is that there's not one singular way to identify loss. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical loss, right? It doesn't have to be death. It could be a transition. Christy and I have talked about this many times. There's so many transitions and seasons of life. And until you get that next season is when you get to stop and kind of take stock of what have happened. And sometimes because you've been in that, you've created those neural pathways, like you said, to create a safe space. Not necessarily that that's your happy space, right? The one that you can thrive in, the thriving space. You're in a safe space that's keeping you from growing any further because you're afraid of, like you said, you're spending more time taking stock of the things that, you don't trust anymore, instead of taking stock of things that make you happy. And I think it also goes back to, and I love the way you said it, creating these things, and it's creating the new neural pathways, right? We've talked about this with habits, and that's why I love that you're bringing it up. Habits and all of these things that we've created over time and the stories we tell ourselves. And I love that it aligns perfectly with what you're saying, but I also love that you've taken it a step further. You've broken it down for people, and you've given people a system that allows them to not only work through it, but work past it. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they think, they've gone to therapy, they've done the breathing, they've done the meditation, they're living with it versus living without it. And I think that's huge, is being able to go, you know what, instead of just surviving, I'm thriving.
Yeah. Well, and it's the uncomfortable comfort zone, right? We get so used to this low grade misery, but it's predictable. And predictability, the brain loves predictability, even if it sucks, right? Even if it's uncomfortable. And so I love that you're speaking to that, because we can really lean into that uncomfortable comfort zone very easily. I know I've done it plenty, still probably do it. And that's why it's a lifelong journey, right? It's ongoing.
Right. And we want to be talking about, and we've mentioned this before, is getting into that uncomfortable zone of growth instead of the uncomfortable comfort zone.
Yes.
Say uncomfortable one more time, Christy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and now I'm not sure if I'm going to form this question the way I want to, or if I'm saying the things correctly, but so I know you're talking about your stress less company, and these are steps within that. And now I know you also have safe conversations as a part of your company. So is this part of the safe conversations, or is that another section step?
Yeah.
Am I asking that the way I want to?
Yeah. So in terms of the stress less method and the work that I've been doing the last 7 years, Safe Conversations is just one of many tools that I offer. But Safe Conversations is one of my primary tools that I teach. So one of the things that I realized for, in my work after the first 5 years or so, was that our relationships have a huge impact, massive impact on our ability to heal, or they can hinder our ability to heal in our relationship with stress and loss. So, for instance, in my story, when I finally opened up with people and asked for some support and asked for some advice, there were people that were completely dismissive, right? Oh, come on. It's been 2 years. It's been such and such. You should be fine. Time, the myth that time heals all wounds, right? Those interactions, or people giving unsolicited advice. Oh, that was my favorite. Totally my favorite. Unsolicited advice, by the way, is criticism. That's really what it is. And so when I was in those types of interactions with other people, it really set me back in my healing journey within myself, but it also ruptured my connection with that person who was likely important to me in my life. And then on the flip side, if I had somebody who was lending me an ear, who only gave advice when I asked for advice, who was just a safe, secure place to land, that helped skyrocket my healing and my process toward that inner freedom. And so I experienced that within myself, how powerful relationships are and impactful they are on our journeys. But I also saw it with my clients who had unhealthy relationship dynamics took 10 times, 100 times longer to reduce their day-to-day stress than those that had healthier interactions and a safe space to land. And so I ended up integrating safe conversations as one of the key tools in my work because of that impact.
I think that's important. I've definitely have had to evolve in conversations, right? In how you support people. And I still go back to it, and not all the time. And I don't know if this is something that you kind of say, yeah, that's a good thing. But I usually ask, I have an 8-year-old and I have a tiny, tiny one. But with the 8-year-old, I'm getting to that point where, and even in my romantic relationship with my husband, sometimes it's like, do you just want me to listen, or do you want my advice?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to go back.
Powerful question.
Still times where I know I should have done that first, right? And you're still learning. But I think that was a huge change for me, because my stories, if you've listened to anything that we've ever shared on our podcast, is always, oh, someone, I don't want people to think I'm stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So my mechanism to protect myself from being stupid is to give you the answer, what I think is the answer, whether or not it's right. So having to switch that and go, you know what, somebody might not want to know the answer and they might want to work through it themselves. Do they just want me to listen? And I feel like that, what I thought of with that is like, that's where I see your conversations going. And that's where they're different from just being talked at, but actually listening and receiving it.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're sharing reminds me of something funny I saw, probably in an Instagram reel or a TikTok video or something, but it was exactly acknowledging that. Like, it was a skit where the person was like, do you want me to just listen? Do you want me to you want advice? Or do you want me, they added a third option, do you want me to get angry on your behalf? And
I mean,
of course the other
too.
person.
I do enjoy that one. I think that should be the third.
Yes, that one's great. So in the skit, of course, the girl chooses angry on her behalf, and the other person's like, I can't believe she would do that. And it was just so good, so wholesome, so funny. But yes, safe conversations really teaches us that, basically, so when we're giving advice, unsolicited advice, what we're actually doing is we're engaging in something called parallel dialogue, which is what we've done for years and years and years and years, hundreds of years, since pretty much the beginning of time. And it's basically where two people talk and no one's really listening. So you have two talkers, no real listeners. We see this all the time in sitcoms, right? So maybe in an episode of Friends, I'll give you an example. I don't know if this ever happened, but I'm just going to use this characters as an example. So let's say Joey and Chandler are sitting at a coffee shop, of course, the coffee shop. And Joey takes a sip of his coffee and he spits it out. And he's like, oh, this coffee is awful. Chandler's response might be, why didn't she call me back? Right? So they have this and we laugh at it because it's relatable, this like rupture in connection that's happening over and over again. But it's really two people talking and no one really listening. So safe conversations engages us in something called horizontal dialogue, which is mind-boggling, I know, where one person talks and one person listens. And it teaches us how to talk without criticism, how to listen without judgment, and how to connect beyond difference. And that last one's really important because the number one reason that people fight is objection to difference. So this conversation methodology is teaching us how to connect even when someone has a differing opinion, a different way of viewing the world, a different way of doing things, has something different.
I think that's huge in the world right now, right? There's so much going on right now where people aren't engaging in conversation, they're engaging in offering their opinion, period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep,
and
parallel dialogue.
And I've never heard of it called that before, the parallel versus horizontal, but it makes so much sense. I mean, I've been in that situation, or even similar to that situation, where I'm trying to listen, but I'm not listening to absorb. I'm listening so I can offer a retort, not a nasty retort, but you know, to offer back and forth conversation, thinking I'm creating conversation. So it's almost like it's not horizontal, it's not parallel, it's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. There's like this, I forget how they actually said it. I heard someone say it once, but something along the lines of like hearing versus listening. So there's conversations where we're sort of responding to what they're saying. But there's a difference between responding to what they're saying, which is sort of our natural way of talking, and really actually listening. And that's what I teach in Safe Conversations is how do we have a conversation where you're actually fully engaged in the listening process, or you're being deeply actually witnessed by the other person if you're sharing.
For sure.
I can imagine that being so healing. That's
Oh yeah.
Just thinking of this, of going through that that place where somebody, I mean, not that we don't have those people in our lives too, but where you really truly have a safe place for people to do that.
Yeah, it's so healing. I would say you'd be shocked, but maybe not, at how many tears can come up, like good tears that can come up from having a safe conversation. Because for the first time in relational history, there's this methodology. There is a methodology. It's this methodology that teaches us empathy, something that's always been so kind of like ephemeral and kind of hard to measure. It teaches us how to provide that for someone. And so Safe Conversations has 3 kind of key steps. So the first piece is mirror. So we mirror back kind of what they're sharing. The second piece is validate, where we validate their experience. And the third piece is empathize. And when you combine those 3 together, that's where the tears can come. That's where it's like, whoa, someone's really seeing me. This is, at first it can be a little eerie, but there's a deep relief when you combine those 3. Now you miss one of those 3, you might miss that feeling of being deeply witnessed, but combine the 3 together. It can be a really powerful experience.
Well, I think that's super important for people to know that there is a person like you and a program like this, because like Chrissy said, we have those people in our lives, but they have lives too, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, their focus isn't to just listen to you, and maybe they want to listen to you intently, but they have all the things going on for themselves. So knowing that there's a safe place or a person that can provide them that time and the steps to reach it, I think that's super important. I think that's where you're doing important work, is that offering the system and that open vulnerability space for people, because even though we have people in our lives, it doesn't mean they don't also have stuff going on, and they're not trying to not be that person for you, but they don't actually know how. Just like you said,
I don't know how.
Some of us don't actually know how to have conversation a way that will support one another. So you mentioned, the objections. Do you feel that that is the biggest mistake people make in relationships, or is there something else that you really find often?
Yeah, so I mean, the human brain is wired to view difference as dangerous. So I wouldn't say that's a mistake. That's just how we're wired. That's just how, it's part of our reality, right? It's something to accept in many ways. Um, and but I would say I think the number one mistake that people make in relationship where is putting negativity into the space between. And I guess I should back up for a second, which is to define a relationship. And so the way that we define relationships in safe conversations is a relationship is two people and the space between them. And so it's that energy, that energetic space between them. And so this is where we get into like quantum theory and the science of it, the energy that's happening and being exchanged. But the number one mistake that I see is people putting negativity into that space between. And negativity really meaning anything that's experienced as a put down. Anything that's experienced as a put down. So it could be an eye roll, it could be tone of voice, it could be a literal direct insult. But that is the quickest way to rupture connection with another person. And we can think about our relationships sort of like a bank account or a piggy bank, right? It takes, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I saw a study a year or so ago that actually measured this, that said I think it was anywhere between 7 and 12
I think it's
positive
9
interactions.
positive. It's 9.
Yeah, 9.
For
Yes.
every one, which is mind-boggling.
Yeah, 9 positive interactions to make up for 1 negative interaction. So the number one mistake would be to not do our best to try to prevent that negativity from happening to begin with, because that's how we quickly overdraft our relational piggy bank or bank account.
That makes so much sense, Carlee. And I think, you're talking about the 9, and I've talked about this before where, there are those people, they might even have a little bit of extra energy that they put into a room, right? And I think my husband and I are 2 of those people. And when we walk in a room, their mood immediately. You don't have to talk to them. You don't even have to touch them. You don't even have to be within 5 feet, but all of a sudden the room has changed, whether it be negative or positive. It's regardless. There's just those people that have, I think, and I kind of think of like an orb, right? They have this big orb around them, and it's either glowing bright or it's like a dark, thunderous, like thunderstorm in there, and you don't know what's happening. But I think that visual of saying a relationship isn't just 2 people, it's the energy between them. That's, when you stop and think about that, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense when I walk in, or I'm gonna have to like hold my eyes open because they roll so much. It's unconscious though, right? Those are the unconscious negative things we do to tell somebody we're irritated or we're unhappy with something that's happening.
Yeah. So oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, one of the things that folks respond to when I say strive for zero negativity is they're like, well, what do you mean? I can't tell the other person what's wrong? Like I can't express my grievances. And my response is always, it's not that you can't express your grievances, it's how you express them. So frustrations are just wishes in disguise. So how can we express our frustrations and grievances in a way that's safe and the way that somebody else is going to be able to receive it?
Interesting. Yeah, I love the way you say that. So maybe you're answering this then, or what is the first thing you would recommend people to do to improve the health of their relationships? Like, is that it, to go for zero negativity?
I would say, yeah, strive for zero negativity. That's like foundational. Make it an agreement with yourself. Set the expectation, the precedent within yourself. It's not forcing the other person to strive for it, but within yourself saying, I really want to have healthy and loving relationships. So I'm going to try to keep negativity from the space between. That would be the foundation. And then the second thing that I would say is if we have sort of an oopsies moment, doing our best to repair. So let's say our eyes accidentally roll, right? And we catch ourselves then saying, "Ooh, oops, let me try that again. Let's rewind and then resend." That could be one really beautiful way. There's many ways that we can repair and we can have a redo. But if we do have an oopsies moment, not being afraid to try again would be a really great
I
Great
think that's
place to
what
start.
I'm glad you went there, Carly, because that's what I was going to ask next. Okay, I know I can't go for zero today. And especially, I'm also just thinking of my relationship with my 8-year-old, right? He's a very independent, strong minded. I don't know where he gets it, 8-year-old. And, it's that constant battle of teaching, wanting to shake the crap out of him. I love him dearly, but wanting to shake, not giving what I've already learned and where I've been. And all right, how do you take it back? So if I have an oopsies, as you say, it's like, oh, how do I repair what I've already done? And you can't necessarily take it back, but also going, all right, well, maybe I need to put 9 positives in there to make up for the negative.
Yeah, which is like the other thing that I typically say, what can we do to create health? Like, what's an easy thing that we can also do to begin creating healthy and loving relationships, which is one way of thinking about putting the positivity in the space between is expressing appreciations that are authentic and genuine and expressing them often. That is a really beautiful way of creating deep connection with somebody, even if it's small. Even if it's like, thanks for opening the blinds this morning because I love natural light. Like, I don't know, I'm on a window theme today.
Right. You're maybe, well, it has been raining here for like the last week, so some sunshine would really turn my day upside. So I'm thinking to all the things that you've been sharing with us. And how would someone say, you know what, I think this is something that I need if maybe they haven't experienced a trauma at the magnitude of someone like you?
Yeah. So, if someone's listening and they're feeling like this is resonant, like maybe there's a desire for healthier relationships or a desire to get that anxiety under control, or that stress under control, I should say. There is no real requirement. The way that I look at it is there's no requirement. You don't have to have some crazy thing happen to you to want to strive for better, to get out of your uncomfortable comfort zone, to have that inner freedom. That's I guess the only real requirement is a desire for that inner freedom and a desire to have healthy and loving relationships. That's the only real requirement. That's what I would say.
So everyone.
Everyone who has those desires, who has
Everyone
those
who has
genuine
those
desires.
desires. Okay. So I truly enjoyed this conversation. I think there's a lot of things I do know and there's a lot of things I don't know. And a lot of things that you can find out is by truly listening to the other person. I think that's something I work on every day. I think Christy and I have talked about it. We all work on this every day. And I love the idea that you have tools in your tool belt that you've created based on your own experience of thriving and getting past something that was really creating blocks for you. And you've given people kind of the steps to create their own happiness, right? And that's what we talk about on here. We're happy, healthy, and skeptical. And I think it's important for people to know there's somewhere they can go where they've tried, as you've said, the traditional responses to trauma or loss or change in season, and they're still not feeling quite the way they want to. And I think that's super important. And I think I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. But there are, for a lot of people, you're going to be having that Safe Conversations workshop coming up, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's coming up quick. So that's going to be on August 26th. And you guys, if you are listening to this, this is an awesome way for you to be introduced to Carlee and what it is that she does. And you can go to stresslessco.com/links and you can have the coupon code that Carlee is offering you guys. It's happy healthy, and that'll actually get you $100 off that workshop. I think it's so amazing for people to experience something like this. It changes lives, right? It seems so simple, but simplicity sometimes can create the biggest changes. And I personally want to thank you. I want to thank Christy for inviting you to have a conversation and introducing, and I want to thank you for giving us your time. And that is it today. I really want to put a lot of things in the show notes. There's so many great things that you guys said, but I want you to say bye, Carlee, to our listeners.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun uncovering so much today.
Right. And as we wrap up, as always, you can join the conversation. We are on Instagram at Happy Healthy Skeptical.